Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and we're going to talk about Gary Gygax and what should be given to Gary Gygax, right? Should people worship Gary Gygax, or should people revere Gary Gygax, right? There's a nuanced difference here, so let's start talking about it. All right, so first of all, let me not get a moment forward. No one should worship Gary Gygax. By the time we're done talking, you'll understand why, okay? But they should revere him, and I think by the time we're done talking, you'll understand that why too. Okay, so one of the things that happens is I have an incredibly nuanced opinion about Gary Gygax and Dungeons & Dragons, right? And boy, oh boy, does the internet hate nuance, right? Like, let's say that you say, hey, I want this community to change this behavior, right? What you'll get back often on the internet is you'll get, hey, you hate this community. That's not true. Like, nuance matters, right? And words have meaning. So today we're going to talk about nuance, because one of the things I've seen in my comments is people saying, you idolize Gary Gygax, you idolize D&D. I understand why people would be confused, right? And so I want to set the record straight now, okay? So let's talk about who Gary Gygax was and what every single Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, every single Dungeons & Dragons edition 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are, okay? All right, so what are they? So who was Gary Gygax, okay? Gary Gygax was simply a human being. He was a man, no more or less. He had no supernatural powers. He did not have any ability to, he did not have any supernatural abilities. Zero, okay? He was just a human being, okay? So, okay, so let's get into this. I'm an evangelical Christian, okay? So I've heard, I did the math. I've heard between probably 500 and 750 sermons, right? And we talk a lot about Jesus Christ, right? Now, Jesus Christ, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, and my faith, was not a human being. He was not like Gary Gygax, right? He was literally the Son of God, and he had powers, right? He was able to do miracles. Gary Gygax never did a miracle, not a single moment when he was on this planet. He never did a miracle, right? And not only was Jesus Christ the Son of God, but Jesus Christ was God, literally. Like all of it. It gets into the Trinity and the whole nine. So Jesus Christ and Gary Gygax are not in the same league, right? Jesus Christ, God himself. Gary Gygax, simply a human being with zero supernatural powers, okay? All right, now, let's talk about Gary Gygax, though. Does that mean that Gary Gygax was just a game designer? No, absolutely not. To fully understand where Gary Gygax should fall in our thoughts is he should be revered. There should be reverence around him, deep respect. Now, why should we have reverence for Gary Gygax, right? Well, on this earth, there are human beings that are transformative, okay? I'll give you an example of one, right? George Washington, okay? He was, a dude would come up to him and say, hey, I'm a farmer. I farm tobacco over there. And when they were done talking with him, they were like, I'm a king breaker. I'm going to free this nation from monarchy. Transformed by a single conversation, right? He was a human being who transformed lives when people encountered him. Not all lives. There were many people who thought George Washington was just a schmuck with wooden teeth, right? Like, and they were like, he's simple and small. I don't think there's anything special about him. A lot of people say that about Gary Gygax today. They're not right. George Washington was a transformative figure, and he transformed thousands of lives that encountered him while he was here on this planet. He's not just, like, he had no supernatural abilities, but the idea that he didn't deserve reverence is ludicrous, right? And you have freedoms today because of the lives that George Washington transformed. Harriet Tubman, right? People would meet her and they'd say, I'm trapped in this situation. She's like, you're not. We're going to work together, and your life is going to be different, right? Like, and she guided people in a way, figuratively and literally, where lives that encountered Harriet Tubman were transformed, right? It's the same with Gary Gygax. So, so basically, I think the biggest thing that Gary Gygax did is he freed all dungeon masters and all dungeon players from bound identity. It's a big topic, right? But I think that Gary Gygax in American history lives at the same level as George Washington and Harriet Tubman. No one should worship or idolize George Washington or Harriet Tubman. They were simply human beings with no supernatural power. However, the idea that they didn't transform lives is ludicrous. And I think anybody who would say that today would find themselves laughed at, frankly. Okay? So Gary Gygax was the same thing. People encountered him and their lives were transformed. Not everyone who met him. Some people thought he was just a game designer, right? I don't think that's the case, right? I think he deserves reverence. Let's talk about every single version of the Dungeons and Dragons game, okay? D&D 1E, 2E, 3E, 4E, and 5E, okay? I'm an evangelical Christian. I have a sacred text. That's called the Holy Bible. When I read that, right, I actually have the Holy Spirit that helps me interpret it. There's a line in Philippians that I read for 20 years and I never understood what it meant. One day the Holy Spirit helped me to understand it and revealed, its true meaning and how I should change my life and my faith and all of that because of it, right? And the Holy Bible is incredibly special. There are no limits to what I would do. There's no limits to what I would do to. Let's get this here. The Bible is in a special place. It is a sacred text. And I honor it as a sacred text, right? And I believe that there are supernatural abilities around it, right? I have this Holy Spirit that helps me understand it. I can pray and say, Lord, help me understand the Holy Bible better, right? And I expect that that's going to be real, and I will understand it better, okay? The Dungeons and Dragons, every single edition of the Dungeons and Dragons, there is no supernatural being that will help you understand the Dungeons and Dragons first edition, second edition, third edition, fourth edition, fifth edition better. None, right? There's no spirit that can help you understand those editions better. Okay, all right. So every single edition of the Dungeons and Dragons game is not a sacred text. However, it is a transformative text. Each version of Dungeons and Dragons lives at exactly the same level as other transformative texts. I'll give you two examples of transformative texts. Okay? The U.S. Constitution. There's no religion in the U.S. Constitution. Our lives are transformed by the U.S. Constitution. It says, hey, you're a human being. This is what you deserve. This is how the people who are elected to lead you should deal with you based on your value and worth as a human being, right? And the U.S. Constitution has transformed millions of lives. It is a transformative document. It is a transformative text. It is not a sacred text. But to say that the U.S. Constitution hasn't transformed millions of lives, changing the way they live, changing how they think of themselves, changing what rights they expect, is ludicrous. Okay? So the U.S. Constitution is a transformative text. Okay? But it is not a sacred text. And Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. This is a transformative text. It is not a sacred text, right? No one should pray that they could understand I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings better, right? Because there shouldn't be an answer to prayer like that. It's not a supernatural text. It isn't a sacred text. It's a transformative text. And millions of people have read I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings and said, oh my gosh, I thought of myself in this low state and that I didn't have value because the world told me I didn't have value. But now I read I read Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings and I see my value. She saw her value and she's telling me how to see my value. I am transformed. I do not walk away unchanged. I value myself in a different way, and this will change every day that I live going forward. Transformative text. And that's where Dungeons and Dragons first edition, second edition, third edition, fourth edition, fifth edition, and someday sixth edition live. They live at the same level as the U.S. Constitution, and they live at the same level as Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. Transformative text. Gary Gygax was a transformative human being. Dungeons & Dragons are transformative. Dungeons & Dragons editions are transformative texts, right? Gary Gygax should be worshipped by no one, idolized by no one, but revered by everyone, okay? The U.S. Constitution should never be worshipped, right? Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, no one should, worship that document, right? And give, and give faith, to it, right? It's just it's only a transformative text, but it absolutely, and so the U.S. Constitution and the and Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, these are transformative texts, and they should never be worshipped. They should never be idolized, but they should be revered. That's important. That's my opinion. What do you think? Do you see the difference between a sacred text and a transformative text? Do you see the difference between a supernatural being and a transformative human? I do, and I'm really, really hoping that others are going to start to see this as well. I see it now. I'm hoping that you will see it someday. All that's my opinion. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.